What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary of HappyValleyInsider.com, a.k.a. PennState.Rivals.com, the go-to site for everything Penn State athletics news, recruiting, etc., etc., etc. Anything Nittany Lions, to be honest with you. Let's start off with the DC talk. So obviously, James Franklin has lost his defensive coordinator and Tom Allen to Clemson. He went down because of family reasons, because of monetary reasons. He's now making over $2 million, it sounds like, at Clemson per year. Previously, as we posted on the last episode, 2 episodes ago, the Penn State 365 podcast, that he was averaging around 1.5, 1.6 per year with Penn State. That number changes a little bit based on bonuses. It's pretty well known that he got a couple bonuses for making college football playoff, and not only making it, but winning a couple games in it as well. With Tom Allen, it's always like depends on who you talk to type situation. Some people liked his defense, some people hated it. I'm in the latter half. I wouldn't say I hated it, I guess. It's just I wasn't as impressed as some might say. I thought the bend don't break mentality kind of drives me nuts a little bit. I prefer Manny Diaz, more aggressive style of coaching, more pressure on the quarterback, kind of trust my DBs a little more. To put them on an island and kind of trust that they'll be able to make plays back there. Regardless, the latest we're hearing is, as of yesterday, January 14th, 2 days ago, we posted that there were 4 names that are being considered for the job. We have now eliminated one name, and that's Jim Knowles from Ohio State. It sounds like Penn State, every time this DC job opens up over the past couple of seasons, James Franklin's one of his top names on that list is Jim Knowles. Reach out to him, see what's going on. It's a never say never situation. We know Ryan Day's being courted a little bit by the Chicago Bears. He's been courted by the Chicago Bears for a long time now. But they have another opening there. They still haven't made a hire, and it's been quite some time for the Bears to not make that hire, which tells me they're going to wait and see what Ryan Day probably does in this national championship game. And if he wins it, he goes out on top. If he loses it, I don't think Ohio State fans are really going to lose any sleep over it, potentially losing their head coach. That being said, does Jim Knowles, a lifelong college football coach, really want to go to the NFL? Because you have to change a lot of things in terms of schemes, in terms of the way you think about things in general. You're going from coaching 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids to now coaching full-grown adults, and it's not as easy. It's a big transition. Now, could he go with Ryan Day if Ryan Day does get that job? Big hypotheticals here. Sure, he could. Either way, based on talking to a couple Ohio State guys that we know over on our network on Rivals, it sounds like Jim Knowles is basically not even being considered for Penn State. There's interest on Penn State's side, not on his side. Now, the big name that everyone keeps talking about is Deanton Lynn, the Penn State alumni. Now, Deanton Lynn has been a highly targeted name, I should say. I shouldn't say highly targeted. I take that back. Deanton Lynn has been one of the better defensive coordinators in college football over the past couple seasons. Now, looking back, where are the numbers I just had? So he was at UCLA in 2023 and then got poached by USC in 2024. Looking at the numbers from before he took over UCLA in 2022 UCLA, put it like this. 29 points per game, 92nd in the country. Awful. 400 yards given up per game. Not good at all. After one season, just one season with essentially, I shouldn't say the same roster, but a little bit of a different roster, in his lone season as defensive coordinator, he had them go from 29 points per game given up to 18.4 points per game given up. On top of that, he cut that yardage per game, opposing yards per game, from 403 to 301. That's impressive for a UCLA team that didn't have a ton of money to work with. Didn't really have a ton of roster retention. Chip Kelly was kind of on a little bit of a warm seat. I wouldn't say a hot seat. So that's huge. Now, let's look at USC, his 1 year there. 2023 USC, before he got there, 34 points per game given up. That was 121st in the country. Year 1 with Deanton Lynn this past season, 24.1. That is a 10-point decrease in terms of opposing points per game. On top of that, they went from giving up 430 yards per game to now just giving up 377 per game. That's pretty damn big. And we got a glimpse of him this past season when Penn State took him on and ended up winning in overtime, 33-30, I think it was, 37-30, 36-30. I forget. I think it was 33-30, if I recall, in overtime. But either way, he's been a damn good defensive coordinator. There's a lot of hype around him. We know there's a ton of interest on Penn State side of things. We know there's been some chatter of flight trackers that people have posted that have a specific flight going out of State College recently all the way out to LA. And there's been some rumors. I'm not going to say it's confirmed by any means, but there's been rumors James Franklin was in LA to meet with Lynn and talk to him about the job. Now, here's the bad news. We do have some friends out on the West Coast that, of course, cover that side of the country in terms of college football. And we were told specifically the Trojans do not want to lose him. I got to emphasize do not. And they are willing to match just about any offer that Penn State throws at him. That's a big reason why there's a lot of talk that this one might be going against Penn State. And on top of it all, it sounds like his wife doesn't have any interest in living in State College either. We've heard that with Tom Allen, and that was a problem with him staying in State College and staying at Penn State as well. They do have a newborn too. I think a 1-year-old newborn. So I get it. And going from LA to State College, it's for any of you that actually attended the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, you can kind of understand two totally different worlds. I'm not going to say one's better than the other. I'm not a big fan of LA personally, but I do get it to an extent for someone that's been in LA for now a couple of years versus going to State College where you've probably have never been, if I had to guess. Now, that being said, D'Anton Lynn is still going to be the top name on the board. He seems like the top realistic target right now for James Franklin. We'll kind of wait and see what happens there. Now, here's the question of what happens if Lynn does say no to the job, gets a new extension at USC. Where do they kind of go next? And there's a couple different options here. So now, one option we've heard is Anthony Poindexter, the co-DC / safeties coach for Penn State for the past couple of seasons now. He would be an in-house promotion, something Penn State hasn't really done with their coordinator position since Ricky Rain a couple of years ago on the offensive side. They haven't done it on the defensive side. Now, Brent Pry came in with Franklin. He was there for 5 years. I think it was 5 years. And then they went out of house, found Manny, found Tom Allen. It seems like they wanted to go out of house with this one. So now there's a couple issues with this. Number one, he's only called defenses once before as the coordinator, and that was with UConn back in 2014-15. Didn't do so hot, but that's also a weird time for UConn's program because they had that really high in like the 06-07 range under Randy Edsall. Then he left, and then I forget who was it. Bob Diaco came in, and someone else came in, and they were just struggling. Like that program was dead in the water. Now they bounced back this past season. They got I think they got 7-8 wins this past season actually. But it's just it's not high major college football. I'm sorry to say it. But coaching down there, he had some struggles. On top of it, we're kind of hearing that he's not super interested in the idea of being a defensive coordinator. He's pretty content in doing his job as is. As a coordinator, you have so much more to worry about with players, with development, with scheme fit, with just every little like you're basically an unofficial head coach of the defense. You have to worry about everything from top to bottom versus where if you're an assistant, like a co-DC / safeties coach, you're basically just focusing on your safeties position group and you're focusing on recruiting for the most part. Of course, there's player development involved in that, but you're not focusing on a team of 60 kids. You're focusing, or no, I'm sorry, a defensive unit of 50, 60 kids. You're focusing on a safeties room that's consisting of 10 guys maybe. And then I'm sure you'll help out the other DBs as well. So maybe 20 guys max, if that. So that's another problem. On top of it all, he finished second a couple years ago at the University of Virginia for their head coaching gig. They picked Tony Elliott, and he's now 11-23 over 3 seasons. His seat is hotter than hot. He's ranked a top 10 hottest seat in college football by coachesHotSeat.com, by other websites. There's a good chance he's probably not going to make it very far into, or I shouldn't say very far past the 2025 season, if he even makes it through the 2025 season. Now, Poindexter, Virginia alum, All-American at Virginia, one of their best players of all time, college football Hall of Famer. We just finished second in the race for that head coaching gig a couple years ago. His numbers retired there. This is a guy that, and programs have been doing this nonstop over the past couple of years. They're trying to get, there's just some type of allure about having a former guy who's a pretty good coach as your head coach. And say, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there's a lot of allure for him to go to Virginia, and it makes a lot of sense. I get it. So hypothetically, he takes the DC job. They have a pretty good season in 2025. He called a good defense. I wouldn't be shocked if they're doing this, if Penn State and James Franklin are doing this all over again in 2026. And then you're kind of at the point where that's what, 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years, 4 in 5 years, if you count Pry, who stayed. Manny Pry. Yeah, okay. That's the problem. So technically, you'll be at square one all over again in January 2026, and we'll be doing another podcast on here talking about new candidates. The third name and final name that we know of has been mentioned on social media by a couple people that he's interviewed already. It's Cleveland Browns safeties coach Ephraim Banda. Yeah, I pronounced that one correct. His name's popped up a couple times over on social media, on the message boards. We posted about him recently. He's got an interesting track record. So we just talked about Manny Diaz and as a former Penn State coordinator. Now this guy he's young. Number one, he's 43. He's considered an up-and-coming coach. He's been coaching for 13 years now. Started out at Incarnate Word as a student assistant before moving to Texas in 2012. At Texas, the defensive coordinator at the time in 2012 was Manny Diaz. Spent couple years as as a graduate assistant with Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz kind of recognized something with him and said, all right, this is a pretty good coach. I think he could probably follow me to a couple different locations. So what he ends up doing is going to Texas for 2 more years, follows Manny Diaz to Mississippi State where he gets promoted, gets quality control coach, then follows Manny Diaz to Miami and becomes Manny Diaz safeties coach for 2 seasons. Manny Diaz leaves for Temple following the 2018 season. Right after he leaves for Temple, technically agreed on verbally or in principle, I forget the whole situation, how that worked. But as many of you might remember, Manny Diaz went to Temple for maybe like a week and then went back to Miami as their head coach again. Went to Temple for that week or whatever. He was set to bring Banda with him. Banda was probably more than likely going to be his defensive coordinator with Temple. Now that's a hell of a move for a guy from a San Antonio, Texas native to go to Philly, going from Texas to Mississippi State to Miami to all the way up to Philly. And we know football's a little bit different in the North, but besides the point. So he leaves. The interim guy promotes Banda to co-DC, gives him a nice title boost. It's just more money. That's all it is. All these co-DCs and co-this and pass game this and pass game that. For the most part, it's just a title boost. So they end up doing that. Banda goes and was ready to leave for Temple. Manny Diaz comes back to Miami for 2 more seasons. 2019, 2020. And I'm sorry, for 3 more seasons because I think he was there till 2021 actually. So he comes back to Miami for 3 more seasons. Banda has that co-DC/safeties title. It's a big reason why they had a top 15 ranked defense in 2019, I believe it was, and then 2020 eventually. And then he ends up leaving because he gets a promotion, or he gets offered a promotion by Blake Anderson out in Utah State. Year 1 of Utah State, they had a damn good defense. 11-3 record, finished in the AP top 25, gave up 24.4 points per game, and that ranked good enough for 48th in the country. Now, the Mountain West isn't great, and the Mountain West is derived of, it kind of doesn't have a ton of talent, but when you have a talented team, and you have a bunch of seniors and a bunch of juniors and a bunch of upperclassmen, you're able to make something work. In year 2, he lost a lot of those seniors and upperclassmen. And the numbers fell a little bit. They finished with a 6-7 record. He finished around 90th in opposing points per game. And he decided to move on. Going from Utah State for 2 years, went to the Cleveland Browns, NFL job for 2 years, the past 2 seasons, where he's led a very talented Browns defense. The Browns, I know it's weird to say because their secondary wasn't phenomenal this year. It actually wasn't good at all, to be honest with you. But in 2023, the Browns led the NFL in total defense in opposing yards per game, giving up 270 per game. That's the fewest by an NFL team since the 2014 Seahawks, which had the Legion of Boom with Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, all those other guys. So that's something to really note. On top of that, his safeties room ranked preseason this year prior to injuries as a top 5 safety room in the NFL, featuring guys like Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, Rodney McLeod, Ronnie Hickman, DeAnthony Bell, several others. So they are a talented group. They are a pretty good group. He's really developed a talent there. I know some fans or some coaches are very, very high on him because for the sole fact that he's getting interviews elsewhere. Now, not just Penn State. It's not even rumored. It's actually been confirmed on social media that the Indianapolis coach interviewed him for their defensive coordinator spot. So this is a guy that really has his eyes set on being a defensive coordinator at the NFL level. So this would not only be a good hire, it's an up-and-comer, it's a Manny Diaz disciple, it's someone that James can go down to Manny and Duke or give him a phone call, whatever, and say, hey, like, just what do you think of this guy? I know he coached with you for a while. I know you brought him to a bunch of different spots. Is he ready to do this job? And I think Manny will truthfully say yes or no. And I can't see him saying no. If this guy's getting interviewed for NFL head coaching jobs, he's ready for the big-time show. At Utah State, his lone play-calling ability or play-calling stint, it's not a great – I mean, year one, he was phenomenal with it. He lost a lot of seniors year two, so it did drop down. I do wish he had a little bit more play-calling experience. I'm always in the boat of getting a veteran personally, especially when, like, Deontay Lynn was the top guy, or is the top guy so far still. But with him possibly saying no, it goes to Poindexter or Ephraim Bonda. And those are the two names with the hottest smoke around them, I guess. They're the most smoke around in terms of who could potentially be that next DC. And I think either one wouldn't be bad. I'd be more concerned about losing... it's tough, actually. I'd be more concerned about losing Poindexter next season just because it seems like Tony Elliott's time in Virginia is basically running out. And I think Poindexter's probably next man in line for that job. I think Bonda will probably get courted by some NFL teams as long as he has a good season, which he should. And he's also going to be working with a hell of a lot more talent. Probably enough talent similar to the talent that Miami had back in the 2019-2018 time, his stint there when they had a top 15 defense. And he's known for an aggressive style defense. I bring it back. I'm tired of all this non-aggression in college football, this bend don't break. Yeah, let him get a couple chunk plays here and there. No, I need aggression up front. I need guys to be pressuring the hell out of that quarterback. I need more blitzes drawn up. I want to make that quarterback's life hell. And I'll trust my DBs. And Penn State, we know, has a couple good ones back there still. Zakee Wheatley was Fiesta Bowl defensive MVP. Had a hell of a postseason. We know A.J. Harris has been pretty damn good this season as a second-year corner. Zion Tracy's looked really well in that Lion role. We know there's some young guys, too, behind. King Mack's back, former starter. I shouldn't say starter. Probably will be a starter this year, but was a kid that was showing tons of flashes as a true freshman before leaving for Alabama. So there's a lot of options back there. Antoine Belgrave, Shorter, John Mitchell. Like, the list goes on and on and on. So, I mean, they have a ton of DBs to work with and a ton of DBs you can trust. And I think this aggressive style of defense with Bonda would actually really benefit Penn State. And on top of it, you might be able to keep them for a couple seasons, pending they don't have a huge defensive performance in 2025, and who knows, maybe the Giants will look at him or something, or the Eagles, or it depends. But yeah, he definitely has eyes on NFL GC jobs, and I'm not too shocked by that. But that's the latest on the defensive coordinator position. Now, something else I really wanted to touch on today, this wide receiver room. I'm going to pull up our transfer tracker right here. So as you can see, they've lost 6 wide receivers in that wide receiver room. 2 of those guys are walk-ons, so that's not too shocking, especially considering given the new rules for the roster. You have to be at a strict 105 now limit per roster, so a lot of these walk-ons are probably just going to entering the portal, and they're going to just drop down significant levels. That being said, I will say, like, the G5s of the world and the FCS schools of the world are going to get significantly better because schools have to cut, like, upwards of, like, 40 kids, 30 kids, just to get that under that roster limit. But besides the point, Harrison Wallace, Amari Evans, 2 starters now gone. It's a little bit of a kick in the nuts, I'm not going to lie. Now, we speculated about this on our message boards, the Lions Den forum, and if you don't know where that's at, you can just go right up here to forums, the Lions Den. And it's our premium forum. We have everything on there from fans talking about the NFL games this past weekend to Kobe King announcing for the draft, as you can see. Nick Dawkins returning, J.B. Nelson returning, etc. Whatever. There's just all kinds of Penn State talk on there. There's all kinds of other talk, too, just sports talk in general, the go-to spot. Anyway, so 2 starters are out, but you're also bringing in 2 new starters, projected starters. in Kyron Hudson, who I think is actually going to be very, very good. He had a quietly good year. We saw him against Penn State where he scored a touchdown this season. I think he had 30, 40 yards that game. He had 450 on the year. A little bit taller guy, 6'4", 6'5"-ish. And then Devontae Ross. Devontae Ross had over 1,000 yards for Troy this past year. Now, he can go on the outside. He can play the slot. I think he'd probably be better suited for the slot, but if you're going to run some 12 personnel sets, it makes sense to put him back on the outside and have that speed out there. Does he have that breakaway speed? No, but I think he has enough to create separation to get open, and he has good hands. Both of them have really good hands, actually. And that's something that the two right there at the bottom, Harrison Wallace and Amari Evans, you can argue their hands are okay. Harrison Wallace, injury-prone, has been injured, 3 out of his 4 years at Penn State? This past season was probably his healthiest one. And then Amari Evans, he never was really able to put it together. He flashed really early on. He flashed in the 2024 or 2023 season. I was really confident that he was going to be something just because of that speed factor. But it just goes to show you, just because you have that straight line speed doesn't mean you have that football speed or that breakaway speed. Two of those guys combined for 5 targets in the college football playoff semifinal game against Notre Dame for 0 catches. 5 targets on the day, 0 catches. I don't see it as a loss, I'll be honest with you. You can debate me on that, but I think you can replace those guys pretty easily, and I think they already did. Now, I think they're also going to hit up the portal in spring for another guy. Who that guy is really to be determined, I should say. One name I guess you can keep an eye on technically, Malachi Fields from Virginia. If Marquise Higgins is still wide receivers coach, which, again, I've said this in one of my old podcasts recently, I don't think he should be. But if he's going to remain the receivers coach this 2025 season, you might have a shot at Malachi Fields still. It's not over. I know he committed to Notre Dame, but hear me out. Nothing's signed because he can't enroll at Notre Dame until after the spring because he needs to graduate first. Once he graduates, you can kind of keep pushing as much as you want. So it's really not over there yet. You get Malachi Fields, I would feel insanely comfortable with this wide receiver room going into 2025. And I will even apologize for criticizing Marquise Higgins, because if you can land him, the kid you recruited to Virginia, by the way, and Malachi Fields to go along with Kyron Hudson, to go along with Devontae Ross, to go along with some of these other young guys that are up-and-comers. Tysier Denmark, I didn't even mention, who's looks pretty good in practices, even in a couple games. I think that the sky could be the limit there. That could be an insane rebuild, I should say, in terms of the wide receiver room. Now, does that happen? I think I'm speculating a little bit too far. I know they have Liam Clifford still. They have, I don't even know. I'm actually looking right now. There's really not a whole lot to go with. Peter Gonzalez is going to probably play some snaps. Josiah Brown, I'm intrigued to see if he ever gets on the field or not, because he's recovering from an injury as well. But anyway, you land Fields, and that's conspiracy theory me. You land Fields to go along with Hudson and Ross. It's a damn good haul in this offseason, all things considered, even with the two starters leaving. Now, Tyler Johnson, Mecky Flowers also left. Mecky Flowers went back and forth between DB and wide receiver. Never really produced anything. Tyler Johnson, speedster, Virginia kid. Just, again, really never got to see the field too much. Not really that big of a loss, in my opinion, at least. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it. We're kind of done with the transfer portal for now. Things are going to keep back up in the spring. Junior days, though, are coming up, and there will be a full list of guys on the Lions Den forum. You can check it out on Twitter. We also tweeted out the link a couple times. Some notable names. Let's see where the notable names are. 2020. Where is it? Visitor. Here we go. Visitor list. I just had it. Where'd it go? Spring visitor list. That's what it was. Okay, running recruiting visitor list for spring. A couple 4-stars coming up from Virginia, a couple from Maryland, Ohio, The first weekend will be not this weekend, next weekend, January 25th. That's going to be the first junior day visits. Then there's also going to be another set of visitors on February 1st. So keep an eye on that. I expect Penn State to probably land at least one of these kids on these visits. That's usually what happens with junior day ones. They'll land a kid or two. Right now they are fifth in the team rankings for recruiting for 2026. They already have 8 commitments, several wide receivers. We know they just kind of missed out on Elias Koch. They actually had Elias Koch, if you want me to be honest with you. We had quotes from him. We had a graphic for him. Like he was ready to go, and a last-minute push from Rutgers in the 11th hour, and that was it. He went to Rutgers in the end, but still a very good wide receiver class haul. They have Jerquaden Guilford, who I think is probably a 4-star, or is a 4-star, I'm sorry. Jasir Rogers, who I think should be a 4-star. LeVar Keys is pretty solid, speedster, smaller guy out of DeMatha. Go along with a damn good quarterback in Troy Hun. Offensive lineman Kevin Brown, and running back Messiah Mickens. Last but not least, DB Matt Sieg, and defensive end out of West Virginia, Daniel Jennings. So pretty good haul so far, pretty good class. I expect them to add to that class before the month is over. So stay tuned for that on pennstate.rivals.com and the Lions Den forum. If you're not on those guys, check out our website, pennstate.rivals.com, and use the promo code 30, RIVALS, all caps, 30 Rivals, one word, and you can get a free 30-day trial. If you want to buy the year edition, I'll even give you a better promo code. All you have to do is just DM us at Penn State Rivals on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, comment, whatever. Shoot us a comment, and I'll send you over that promo code, and you can get the year for up to 50 to 60% off. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got today. Hopefully I'll be back on here soon with some news of a new defensive coordinator, we hope. But for me, that's another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast, signing off.